As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. Our returning guest today, Bill Murphy, is a renowned expert on the gold and silver markets. He's co-founder of GATA.org, the Gold Antitrust Action Committee. He's been an advocate for sanity and honesty and transparency and exposing manipulation of precious metals prices for many years. He's here returning with us today on Reluctant Preppers to confirm with us what appears to be an alternate reality and a disconnect, what people are seeing between physical availability of precious metals versus the plunging prices, and other topics related to other commodities, and the comparison between our dollar and what is real. So, Bill, thank you for coming back and joining us again on Reluctant Preppers.
Great to be here, Dunigan. Thank you.
If we could start off the first topic being about the record volatility in the stock market. In the past couple of weeks, we've seen all-time record swings in the Dow average, and in addition to having seen record highs in the stock market, some people have related to the Fed's easy money policies over the last several years, but a lot of common people interpret that as a reliable indicator that the health of the economy is strong, because the stock markets are hitting record highs, week after week, month after month, and yet we're seeing this new record drop in the Dow just a few weeks ago. And could you tell us what that's all about, both the record highs, the record volatility, and does this spell the tremors before the big collapse?
Well, tremors for sure. Over the last year, every time the Dow and NASDAQ were getting ready to crap out, they would go right back up again. And it must have happened 15 times. And as far as the Dow is concerned, the NASDAQ too, you've got a massive top formation. And basically, this is after years of QE and propping the market up. From where I come from, there's a plunge protection team out there and counterparty risk management group that helps to stabilize the market when it's in trouble, and that it's overvalued, and that it's an accident waiting to happen. And all of a sudden, you get certain catalysts that kick in, whether it's China or other factors, and all of a sudden things just disappear, because in my opinion, the strength in the market and the lack of volatility until late has been unnatural, and the odds of something giving away out of nowhere are there, and that's where you get these sudden crashes and volatility on the downside. And we got the fall coming, and we're notorious for that. So people have to be prepared that something could happen that is totally that they're unprepared for.
Now, you mentioned, one of the main things that GATA has been investigating and exposing over the years is manipulation in the gold and silver markets. You also have said, there's the plunge protection team and other things that are mirroring that kind of intervention in the stock markets. Can you help people understand some of those mechanisms that are in place that prevent the natural behavior? In other words, things will seem they won't really indicate how the health of what's really going on, because there's so many band-aids that are being thrown in place.
Well, for years, here and there, the Dow in the last 45 minutes of trading was in trouble, would rally out of nowhere, and there'd be talk of some rumor that you'd never heard of again after in the next day. And I think people that understand the markets, you realize that that the government is allowed to do this. It's pretty well acknowledged that there is the working group in financial markets and the plunge protection team, and then there's this counterparty risk management policy group, which is there with some of the big financial institutions, where they get together to stabilize the market when they think it's falling apart. Where you keep doing that, you don't let the natural market forces take hold, and that's and this is my own personal opinion of what's occurred. And all of a sudden, now after all this efforts to prop the market up with the low interest rates and quantitative easing, all of a sudden, what do you do for an encore? And I think it's hitting a brick wall, and that's why all of a sudden you're starting to see these holes on the downside, and it's very likely that we're going to see more of them in this fall.
In contrast to the stock market, turning to something more solid, the gold and silver markets, with these 5-year lows we've been seeing in the price of silver and gold, what are the mechanisms that continue to allow that to happen if, in fact, things are as risky as we're told that they are in the economy? How can it be that safe haven things like precious metals are continuing to drive to 5-year lows?
Well, we've never seen this, what we call the gold cartel, the U.S. government and other central banks and bullion banks, be so aggressive as they've been in the gold and silver markets. And you've got a contrast right now where you're getting stories from all over the world about a lack of physical market supply, premiums going up, backwardization in the gold market. You talk about in the silver market, coins are unavailable, silver coins in many places. Delays are growing, so their premiums are increasing, and yet the price action in silver is, and it has been for 4 years, the worst I've ever seen in 40 years. It seems like the more bullish the story gets for silver, the worse the price action. We honestly don't know where they've got all this physical silver from. However, that said, I think it's getting to the point where this thing is just going to explode out of nowhere, that they've pushed the envelope as far as it can go when it comes to both gold and silver. And there's probably different ways that they've done it, whether it's through ETFs and other ways they've managed to get enough physical to get the job done. But one thing of interest in terms of the silver market that I've been pointing out is that only a few months ago, the open interest was at an all-time high, even though the price was very low. Normally, open interest, when you go below the cost of production for many silver for producers of any kind, the open interest falls apart. Well, the silver open interest went to an all-time high at 202,000. And the bad guys, just JPM and their allies, just kept pounding away and pouring in the paper market, and the price action has been terrible. Well, in the last few months, the open interest has gone down 50,000 contracts. And that's what should happen. And I'm hoping what it means is that the JP Morgan gang and the people suppressing the price know what's coming in the very near future and have been getting out of their short positions and before the inevitable happens. So we'll see what happens in the next few weeks and over this fall. But at some point here, this market just has to explode out of nowhere, or we're just plain wrong.
Now, for people who have been accumulating silver as a way of hedging risk to protect their families, again, the high stock market prices and the low silver prices can shake people's confidence and make them think, well, maybe everything is okay after all, because the stock market is usually an indicator of confidence on the part of the people and sentiment. And the silver price or precious metals prices have historically been a contrarian signal of confidence. In other words, no confidence, flight into those as a protection. But I was noticing on your website, GATA.org, in your recent releases section, you had an interview with Eric Sprott where he said, you have to go against the crowd quite often, but at the same time, you must see evidence of something coming together that you believe in. So could you give another word about the contrarian aspects or opportunities that's present today, and does it make sense for people who have been taking that position to sort of stick to their guns and hold their course?
Well, I'm a big Eric Sprott fan, and of course he's been a big supporter of GATA, but he's known as one of the shrewdest investors in all of Canada, and Eric thinks and has for some time that silver is going over $100 per ounce. So you're talking about quite a windfall here when this thing finally explodes, and I think Eric's going to be right again. So, and he's right. Right now, when the prices are so low and the risk-reward ratio so high, I mean, it's probably not a better time in history to be involved in gold and silver. And silver is probably the most explosive one for what they've done to it. And once the shackles come unleashed, it's actually going to be hard to get it, to buy it. I mean, it's going to be that explosive. And of course, it never seems that way when you're in the tank like this, but it's coming, and there'll be some catalyst that'll kick it off. And I expect it to kick in this fall. And so now's the time to be taking advantage of this risk-reward opportunity. And if nothing else, for a hedge, I mean, it's going to be a huge winner.
In addition to precious metals as something that's real and tangible, other commodities like gasoline have been also beaten down recently. We had pump prices in our neck of the woods at $1.85 earlier this week. And looking back at the inflation adjustment calculator charts, in order to find gas that cheap, you'd have to go back to the late 1990s, so like 20 years back almost, to find gas as cheap as it is today compared to inflation-adjusted dollars. So with the dollar being beaten down through the free money policy of the Fed, so we're measuring with a smaller and smaller, ever-shrinking yardstick, and yet things that are real, like gasoline and gold and silver, being cheaper than they've been in multi-years. Is there anything else going on in the area of commodities, including gasoline, that we should be aware of that may be a false signal, not showing strength in the dollar?
Well, there's two ways you can look at it. Gold and silver as commodities, or gold and silver as money. And of course, this is why the gold cartel has made their moves, and to take the prices down, to take it off. Gold is looked by many people as a barometer of U.S. financial market health. And when it's down, people think things are better off, and when they're up, it's always a crisis. It's bad for the politicians, bad for the bankers, and what do the press talk about? Whether it's some international crisis or bad for the dollar or inflation, it's not good. A rising gold price is generally bad for business. So they've gone out of their way to take gold and silver, off the investment radar screen. You mentioned it earlier. It gets people depressed, and naturally so when you see what they do. But that's what we do, is we follow it every day, and we watch how they operate. At certain times in London, 3 a.m. New York time, it goes down 3 out of 4 days, every time. When there's good news, the price is never allowed to go up or stay up. There's all kinds of tactics that, we've seen them use to suppress the price, and of course, then it feeds on itself. And it gets the hedge funds and other, technical traders short, and then they go with the flow. So it's that the issue of whether, gold, if you look at gold as money or gold as a commodity, because commodities, as you're saying, are in the tank. What Goldman Sachs is now calling for $20 oil. Well, that can be where certain things can fall apart, but you've got a crisis when it comes to the money issue, and that's when gold and silver will take off.
In that future view of gold and silver, things that would trigger recognition and a rationalization of the prices to be where they should be, what kind of triggers do you think are most likely based on the things that you've seen happening, and how soon do you think some of those most likely triggers might fire? Well,
it could be right around the corner. The biggest thing is the fear trade, where so many people are counting on the stock market, to hold its own for their wealth situation. All of a sudden that starts to fade, and what's our government going to do? I mean, they've either got to let us go into deflation based on what other commodities are doing, or they're going to have to step on the pedal yet again and put more money in the system. And at some point, how much of all this paper creation, what does it do to all the currencies? I mean, which currency is worse than the next? And I think that's when people all of a sudden are going to see what's going on, and how do you protect yourself? Well, historically, gold and silver, because it's associated with it, is the place to be to hold value.
Now, over the years, you've seen evidence of this direct manipulation or indirect manipulation in the precious metals, driving them down below where they should be. Do you think, in your view, that there's going to be any kind of real enforcement and real coming to terms with that would be one of the triggers that would allow precious metals to regain their normal rate? Or have you basically think that the corruption or the involvement of manipulation is so endemic in the system now that that's just there to stay?
Well, there's a couple of questions there. First of all, it's beyond my comprehension how people can't understand why gold and silver aren't manipulated when you look at what's happened in all these other markets of late, and the convictions, or not so much, but the fines given to the banks for rigging markets, whether it's the LIBOR rate, currencies, energy markets, mortgage markets. I mean, what has J.P. Morgan paid $30 billion in fines for rigging markets? That's the Fed's bank. What makes you think they wouldn't be in there manipulating the gold and silver markets? So, that issue stands out, and what I think is going to happen is that they're going to lose control of the physical markets, and we have signs of that, as I mentioned earlier, right now. Our friend Peter Hambro explained to Bloomberg recently that in London that physical gold is becoming hard to come by in size, and all of a sudden, when the gold cartel loses control of the physical markets, that's when all heck breaks loose, and you're going to see price explosions coming. I expect it this fall, but it could be longer, but it's coming. And when it happens, it's liable to be volatile. And people that, can get on board now are going to find it very hard to pay up. So this is the time to pay attention.
Yeah, that's a message that other people on our channel have brought as well, is that we're talking about being aware and prepared. And multiple people have made the point that the time to fix your roof is when it's not raining. The time to get your physical precious metals is when they're available and when the prices are at multi-year lows. So it sounds like you're reiterating that conclusion that this is an outstanding opportunity for people who want to reduce risk for their family by at least putting some of their nest egg into something that's not tied to these markets that have been propped up by the easy money policies of the Fed.
Well, yeah, and I think probably the biggest move in history in markets is going to come in the gold silver shares, which are right down to it's incredible lows. I mean, I think when I started my website, La Metropole Cafe, in September 1998, I don't know, the XAU was in the 60s. Now it's in the 40s. I mean, Barrick Gold's gone from 18 to less than 60 on Friday at one point. So, I mean, these things are given up for nothing. And when this whole thing turns, this little tiny market, people won't believe the returns that we've made in the gold silver share market. And it hasn't happened yet. And the HUI at 107 or so was at 101 the other day, which is, new lows. But when this changes and the world decides this is the place to be, the upside will be phenomenal.
Well, Bill Murphy, we've always appreciated your visiting us here on Reluctant Preppers. And if there was one more message you wanted to give our Reluctant Preppers audience to help them to be aware and prepared as they watch this fall unfold particularly, is there anything in particular you want them to keep their eyes open for?
Well, I think you've covered it. I mean, in the sense that, what this gold cartel has done is try to get everyone depressed, and they've done a good job in the gold, silver, and share markets. And they're going to hit the wall. And that's what I'd like to stress, is that when the change comes, it's going to be volatile and it will be dramatic. And as you just said, now's the time to be paying attention, not running away.
Bill Murphy, co-founder of GATA.org. Thank you again for joining us here again on Reluctant Preppers.
My pleasure.